Welcome to another episode of The Future is Old, the podcast about the one thing we all become, old. I'm your host, Peter Caldas.
And I am Rach Angard.
Rach, I am super excited to be back in the studio.
Oh, glad to have you back. Did I warm your seat up enough for you?
You did. It was great. Very cozy and comfy. As you know, Rach, and as some of you will know by the time this episode comes out, I was doing some caregiving. Unfortunately, my father passed away of stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and it was a really rapid decline. Yeah. But one of the things that I learned lots of things during this process, which will be the subject of a couple of episodes,
I'm sure,
coming up.
Yep.
Whether it's caregiving, whether it's our broken healthcare system, whether it's our compassionate healthcare workers who are trying to do their best, but navigating a system that really is incentivized in god-awful ways.
Financially as opposed to heart.
Yeah. But as it relates to this episode, it's funny when I remember talking to my father, maybe before he found out he was sick. He was president of his church. He retired from a high-profile career in global pharmaceuticals, had a network of people. And one of the things, despite all of that, and his grandkids, his wife, he once confided in me that he feels lonely.
Really?
And I'm like, but you're so active and busy.
And feels so connected.
And so connected to his culture and his community and his faith. But fundamentally, at the age of 75, he felt lonely.
Really?
And as a man who sort of retired late in his sort of, post 65 years, sort of retired around 71, 72, it struck me that his entire identity was tied to his work.
Yeah.
And today's guest talks about that. And that's why I'm really excited about today's guest, because he is going to give us tips on how we can age well by making sure we have the social ties we need.
Important. So important.
So, shall we get to the episode?
Let's get to the episode.
Our guest today is the founder and chair of the Longevity Project, which researches the impact of longer lives on civil society. He hosts the podcast Century Lives from the Stanford Center on Longevity. He's contributed writing numerous national publications and was the CEO of NPR for almost a decade. He is the author of a fantastic new book, Healthy to 100: How Strong Social Ties Lead to Long Lives. Please welcome to The Future is Old, Ken Stern. Ken, hello.
Hello. Hi, Peter. Hi, Rach. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Ken, I want to talk to you because your new book tackles something that I feel like people still ignore despite all the things we've been through in the last 6 years, whether it's COVID and isolation, the studies that are out there. I'm hoping we can just get right into it and tell us why you think it's important to have social ties.
Oh, so I think one of the things I've discovered so I've been involved in the longevity game, let's call it the longevity game for about a decade now. And one of the things I discovered along the way, actually, when I was reporting for my podcast, Century Lives, was the extraordinary amount of research that shows the direct link between healthy aging and social connection. Being lonely is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Jeez.
Wow.
And social connection, on the other hand, is one of the key pathways to health, both physical and cognitive health. It's not to say that other things are nutrition, fitness, access to healthcare, they're important. But I think, as you suggested, Peter, in how we think about the ways of healthy aging, we tend to over-index on those things and forget about the importance of social connection and the risks of social isolation and loneliness to healthy aging.
Why is that, Ken? What has changed?
So I think I think part of the problem is for the last 50 years, we as a country have forgotten how to be socially connected. We have all the metrics of social connection: how many friends we have, how many time we spend with others, how long we sit at meals, how many hours we're alone. All have gone in the wrong direction. And I think with that sort of a national forgetfulness about the importance of social connection, both to individual and community health. And what we're seeing, I think, in some of the challenges we have around healthy aging and challenges we have as a country all relate to the same thing, which is our continuing deficits around social connection and community.
And can I ask a quick question? What do you think are the causes of the loss of those social ties over the last 50 years? Like, what
Yeah,
have we
so
seen
there's
that's
actually
changed?
a story that starts almost in 1980. It's something that you could actually date, which is a little bit strange. And I know it's that date because that's when Bob Putnam, who wrote Bowling Alone, did his
Mm.
study. So you might know the book Bowling Alone, which is about the decline in social capital. That came out in
Mm.
2003. But his study period was around the years around 1980, which is when
Mm.
we saw two things happening. One is the decline in all the institutions that tended to bring people together:
Hmm.
religious organization, unions, PTAs, sewing circle, book clubs, Elks clubs. All of those memberships in all those activities began to plunge.
Hmm.
And what happened was it was being replaced by solitary activities like watching television. So that
Uh,
was about the
mm.
period when television became ubiquitous and we started watching it 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day.
Oof.
And now things have gotten worse, not because we watch more television, we actually watch less, but it's been replaced by phones and all the hours we spend each day with
Yeah.
phones. And those are the things that displace collectivist activities in favor of individual activities on your phone and social media and things like that.
Ken, let's tie this to aging. Why is isolation so pernicious to aging?
Yeah, so let's actually one of the reasons I think we have a difficulty of thinking about social connection as an important health, so as a public health matter, is because it's actually a little hard to understand the connection between social connection and physical health.
Hmm.
And I think the best answer was when Vivek Murthy wrote the Surgeon General's warning on the loneliness crisis. He sort of laid out the fact that biologically, historically, essentially for as long as humans existed, we've known that safety comes from being part of a collective. Being
Right.
alone and isolated means you are at risk.
Hmm.
And being lonely led to a biological response of stress, and being chronically lonely led to chronic stress. And we know the effects of chronic stress on inflammation and inflammation on cognitive health and physical health and everything from cancer to heart disease. So it's that actually biological. You can actually see it at the cellular level of
Wow.
what happens when you're lonely compared to when you're socially connected. And I think there's also a correlative effect. If you're home alone, you're social isolated, you're not moving, and we know how important movement is to health,
Yeah.
and you're not getting social cues about taking care of yourself that we all rely on. So there's a lot that goes on that really says, hey, social connection is really important to healthy aging.
Wow.
And we think about people over the age of 50 who are at greater risk of social isolation than any other stage of life. We can understand this, or all the challenges that ladder up into social connection and healthy aging.
Ken, I'm wondering, in your work, have you come across any differences between men and women with regards to social isolation?
That's a great question, Peter. Yes. One thing, so I will tell you, there's actually a lot to talk about there, but I'll start with the observations. So for my book, Healthy 100, I traveled around the world to try to understand how other healthier countries are sort of coping with the challenges. I mean, if you get on the subway in Seoul or in Singapore or in Rome, you'll still see the same thing. People still are heads down in their phones. They haven't escaped the curse of technology. But what they've done is they've put social connection as a sort of a central place of the public health agenda. So social infrastructure is really important, especially in the second half of life. But what I saw as I traveled, which was, going from volunteer activities in Italy to learning activities in Korea, lifelong learning activities in Korea, to work activities in Japan, it was women who were much more likely to join. And I remember going to an active aging, sort of a senior center, what they call an active aging center in Omena, Italy. And I was there were about 30 people there, and I was the only guy.
Oh, wow.
And I asked about this, as I asked lots of places, and they were always like, it's just harder to get men in retirement out of the house. I think the work cliff hits them harder because it tends to be more of their social identity, and they're just not used to sort of these joining social connection activities. So it's a bigger challenge for men than women. Women have their own challenges because they face They have longer lives, which is good, but that raises longer, they have larger financial challenges. They have higher stress from caregiving and that often leads to challenges around social connection in the second half. But it's still not the same as men, who I think are specifically challenged about social connection after retirement.
Wow.
Ken, I'm curious, why is that? I come from a family who are Greek immigrants. And when you go back to Greece, you go to these old villages and you see men hanging around the coffee shops at all hours of the day and really convening with one another. What's unique about maybe our culture that doesn't allow for that?
Well, so there are, I think it's one of the, we're talking billions of people. So, there are a lot of different stories and therefore lots of good examples of men getting together, as you would say, in the Greek islands or lots of other places. But I think it relates often to the different roles that men and women have traditionally played in society. And one of those is work. And men are taught, I think, to wrap up their identity in work and work networks, at least in the U.S. and many other parts of the world as well. And they have I think men have a harder time grappling with the loss of work and work identities. I have a friend named Mebs who tells this story of at age 49, he sold his company. And he said, at 49, I was the youngest CEO of I think it was an average PR company in Canada. And on a Monday, I was Mebs. He lost, in that weekend, he lost his identity and he didn't know what to do. So, and there are lots of stories like that. And there are lots of stories like that with women too, but I think it has traditionally fallen heavier on men.
And the other tie here is how different ages deal with social isolation. Ken, I'm curious about your work related to multi-generational connections and relationship building. Tell us how having such multi-generational connections actually helps improve social ties.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you a story, but let's actually talk about the hard part about that, which is my son. I have an 18-year-old son. His generation spends an hour less a day with friends than my generation does.
Wow.
The same age. I mean, that's a lot
of time.
right? Because they're right. Think about sort of the time they spend on phones. If you have kids or other friends of that age, it's a really hard time to come of age right now, especially given COVID and technology change. And you see it in his life and the life of the people he spends time with. But I do think multi-generational, I'm glad, Peter, that you brought up the value of intergenerational relationships. Our friend, I think I can say all of our friends, Mark Friedman, is fond of saying that the generations fit together like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And that's, you can understand why a relationship with a young person is energizing and valuable for the old, but also the single marker of success, most likelihood marker of success for a young at-risk person is a relationship with an unrelated older person. So developmentally, the generations play an important role of this. And if I could tell a story, actually, Mark Friedman for sent me there, so he'll play a role in this both parts of the story. So I was doing a report. I was interviewing Mark for again my podcast Century Lives, and the focus was on retirement communities in the U.S. So I had just been to a place called Latitudes Margaritaville, which is a Jimmy Buffett themed retirement community in Panama City, Florida. And Mark suggested that I should go to Gorham House in Gorham, Maine, which is a combination nursing home and preschool in a small town in Maine. So I did, because I'm very, you told me to go somewhere. And I would.
You listen to Mark.
And I listened to Mark, exactly. So a double whammy there. I'm very easily influenced, especially when it comes to travel. And you go there and, you just see the life. I mean, so the value that the young folks having 4, 5, 6-year-olds wandering around this this nursing home, and the value it brings. And the highlight of the week is when they do this little parade through the through the nursing home every Friday, and how sort of the joy that spreads. But the moment that was actually most significant to me was when I was interviewing the preschool director, and she told me that the elementary school teachers in Gorham, who get these kids after they leave the preschool, told her that the most empathetic children in Gorham elementary schools were the kids who come through this preschool. Because they get trained early on the value of diversity and differences.
Cool.
So when another kid comes in who's in a wheelchair, they're like, all the other kids are scared of this kid. They don't know what to make of it. But the kids from the preschool, the Gorham House preschool, they know, they recognize it. They're used to differences, and they've been, without knowing it, they've been trained to be empathetic to differences. And that story is going to stick with me forever.
Yeah,
it just
that
shows
is so
you the
cool.
value of these intergenerational relationships.
And Ken, that story reminds me of a recent trip I took last year. I was in Kerala, India, which is sort of a state in southern India. And in Kerala, we visited an adult day center that was sharing a wall with a daycare. And a child's daycare. And to see these kids and adults interact and really look forward to seeing one another. I mean, the teachers had to break them up so they could do their respective work. It was really amazing and powerful. And I'm glad to see similar models here in the States.
Wow.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing I think, Peter, so that's a beautiful story. And I'll probably steal it as my own at some point.
Take it.
Thank you. I remember my trip to Kerala, India. Yeah. Is that, you have wonderful examples like Gorham House here in the States, and it's not the only one. But in other places, like in Singapore, it's government policy, right? This is not just sort of a one-off that relates to the vision of an individual in one place. It is government policy to keep the generations together in housing, in schooling, in learning settings, in work settings, or as many, in all the ways you see senior centers becoming centers for old age. You see playgrounds next to exercise centers for older folks.
Wow,
you see all things being put together as part of a national policy that intergenerational relationships matter to all the generations.
Could that work here in the U.S.?
So not as easily, right? So Singapore is a fantastic example. There's a lot to learn. The government there has lots of levers to pull. They own 90% of the housing stock. So every apartment house is intergenerational by design. That doesn't exist here. Obviously, you can't immediately transport it. But I think you can transport the value of it and try to think on a community levels how to keep generations together. You won't have sort of this instant national policy on it, but you can have communities to think about that. There are plenty of examples here, as we just talked about one. I was actually up in Frederick, Maryland, not so long ago, where they just built inside a large city park, a park just for sort of an exercise park for older adults.
Cool.
But it's next to a playground. So those things happen. They just need to happen much more at scale, and they can.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm wondering whether you're coming across creative solutions that are scalable. In other words, in addition to these things that you've discussed, like, are there things or organizations that are surprising you in reaching out across generations to build social ties?
Yeah, constantly. There are universities that are now thinking about integrating, senior housing into it. I won't call it a movement, but there are a number of examples where there's happening. So I'm constantly finding you might think of as small or individual examples of it. What I think we need to move from is sort of this, individual points of light, which are sort of dot here and there, if you want to turn on a map, heat map of the United States, into much larger, sort of broader social movement. I do think we're actually at a place, I will tell both of you, that we've moved from the idea that social connection is not a topic that people think about when it comes to health. I think it is now.
Yeah.
But it's now like the weather. We all talk about it, but no one does anything about it. And I think we're ready for that next step to think about how do we scale and try to create social connection, intergenerational connection on a much larger level.
Cool.
Ken, it strikes me that in the university context this is almost at a business imperative for some of these academic institutions who are literally running out of students to enroll. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering whether there aren't lessons for other businesses who are similarly sort of youth focused.
Hmm.
They could leverage this moment that we're in to actually, reimagine their business model and at the same time build these multi-generational ties.
Yeah. So I think that's such an interesting point, right? We have declining birth rates, we have declining immigration rates because which always brought in younger people. We have increased longevity. So we have a complete change, inversion of sort of the aging pyramid from a country that's defined by lots of young people and a few old people to a country that's pretty much evenly distributed across the first 80 years of life. That is going to be a business imperative. It's going to be a workforce imperative. I just don't think that the culture has reached it yet. Other countries have. I think that's the interesting thing I found, which is other countries hit the age tunnel before us. Japan, where 10% of the population is over 80 and 30% is over the age of 65. They know what it's like to have a super age population and the implications for that, how they live.
So
We'll get
Ken,
there. We'll just be a little slower about it. Yeah.
Well, what are we going to do with our
Yeah.
longer lives? If I turn 100, reach 120? Is that
Yeah,
what we're
I'm.
aiming for?
Yeah, my goal is to be 120
What
and
are we
have
gonna do
my
with those
7
years?
daughters around me.
No kidding, 120. All right, well, that's pretty ambitious. That would make you the second longest lived person ever. So,
Okay, I'm coming for you, Jean. I can't remember her last name, but that French woman.
Calumet. Jean
Calumet. That's
Yeah.
right. I'm coming
That's
for you.
122. Yeah. So
all right.
you got a ways to go.
Okay.
But best of luck to you. So, so I think our longer lives will be different. So I think we have to, this is what my friends at Stanford called the new map of life. How do we reimagine a life where some of the rules that, we're supposed to learn till 20 and then stop, that we're supposed to work till 65 and then stop. And then we're supposed to basically decline after that until we die.
Right.
None of that makes sense in a life that is going to be 80, 90, 100 years old. The median life expectancy for women in Japan is now 90. Exactly,
Wow.
to the decimal point. Right. So, that means if you're a woman, you die in Japan at 89, you don't say that's a long life. You say bad luck. That it's a very big change in sort of our perceptions. So Japan, they don't think the years after 65 are years which you stop working. They think those, work is a means of, especially part-time work, a means of social connection, meaning, purpose in the second half of life. They sort of reimagined very quickly the rules of work. In Korea, they've created lifelong learning as a constitutional right. So many more people are going back to school or never leaving school in some fashion across their life course. So there are all sorts of ways to sort of reimagine what our life would be like if we weren't so tied into these rules that were made up when our life expectancy was something like 40 or 45.
Wow.
Ken, one of the things that we talk about in X50 is how our sort of North Star is to create a world that values aging. And I'm wondering, these examples you just gave, are you seeing that these societies value aging fundamentally to actually be doing these sorts of things?
Yeah, so that's such an important question. And I think sort of the cultural, so a lot of what my research and my writing is about is really about the cultural script, how we think we're supposed to live and how we think different stages of life are about. And in the US, we have a cultural script for many of us that diminishes the years past 50 and past 60 and past 70 as years of decline. They don't think about it that way in other cultures. Some of that's inherited. There's a much sort of traditional respect for aging in Asian and Latino cultures, some of which happily we're importing here. There's also a greater sense of economic need. Hey, we need those folks to be economically viable and contributing and not taking, just because of the super aging of the population. And there's a general acceptance that older folks, define however you want, 50, 60, 70, should be socially contributing in some ways, whether that's in intergenerational care or working or volunteering. That's part of making the second half of life as meaningful and valuable and purposeful as the first.
Wow.
And that's a cultural norm in lots of places in ways that it's not yet here.
You know, interesting. What has arrived in terms of cultural norms is there seems to be a sort of binary take on the word longevity
Oh, yeah.
itself. I'm wondering, you know, there's sort of, on the one hand, you have this debate amongst billionaires to live to be 200. That's their version of longevity. And then you have sort of the rest of society's version of longevity. Tell me about your take on that word and where you land.
Yeah, so I definitely take. I am not part of the bro culture, that which sadly I think is sort of has the upper hand in terms of the cultural understanding of the word longevity. So when I talk about the longevity project and my work on longevity, I often have to quickly clarify that I don't mean, the DNA or the
blood
super drugs and the other
transfusion.
ways. Yeah, exactly. The Brian Johnsons of the world.
That's exactly right.
That people are going to live to 180 or put their brains in the cloud. An approach that I think is both not likely, but also would be available to the few, while the many of us are left behind. That's an unlikable way of thinking about longevity, at least in its current incarnation. For us, for longevity, I'm part of the ecosystem. Things of longevity is how do you change the conversation from aging, which is often interpreted as like, what do you do with all these old people, to longevity, which is how do you reinvent the life course so all stages of life can be meaningful, purposeful, and contribute. And that's true whether you're 15 or 75 or 90. And that's the longevity that I hope wins out in the end and becomes sort of our goal as a nation.
It's an inclusive view of longevity, isn't it?
And a less fear-based one. And Ken, I'm curious about your conception around this as well. Like, I'm such a hater on the tech bro longevity movement. You can always catch me, shitting on it. And it's like, I just feel like it's people who are so scared to die. And so they... Oh God. I was hoping you would align with me on this.
So I actually wrote about that book because I think, so I've also, I've interviewed lots and lots of super agers, people more than I care to count or can count, people over the age of 100.
Wow.
And they are not, the tech bros seem to be motivated by fear of death. And that's not what motivates the people who are actually the most successful agers. They're the ones who are motivated by their love of life and their social connections and what happens every day in their lives. And I think that's a lesson, which is why I'm skeptical of the tech bros and their success, even if they have some great science being created. I think because of the lessons I've learned from super agers, for lack of a better word, about how they managed to live and why they managed to live so long and so well. And that's more about social connection, meaning, and purpose than it is about genetics or finding some superfoods or super drugs.
Right.
Ken, I can't believe we're already at time
No!
before we wrap up with some rapid fire questions. But I have one last question, this point about lessons. What are some lessons or maybe the top 3 tips from your book that you could share with us on how you maintain social ties as you age?
Yeah, so I think one is, I'll start with planning. So we've been taught, I think, by the financial services industry that planning for the years past 65 is about financial planning. That's really important. Let's all acknowledge that. But planning, but what has happened is we often hit 65, and I've seen it with my friends as I hit 62, almost 63. We don't actually think about what's next and how to make that next phase, our next act, as valuable and as rich as the first. And we need to start thinking about that earlier, just as we've been taught to think about financial planning. The second thing is, I would say, to your point, I think you basically teed this question up for me, Peter. Healthy aging is a lot about positive attitudes.
Right.
Becca Levy from Yale has just shown the importance, has shown that those who have valuable views of positive views of aging live about 8 years longer than those with the most negative views of aging. And she just released research just a couple of weeks ago that showed those with positive views of aging actually tend to get better, stronger, either physically stronger, walk faster, or cognitively better as they age, which I think is sort of a stunning find.
Yeah.
So positive views of aging is really important. And then I think sort of sloughing off some of the conventions that we've been told about, that we're supposed to stop learning at 21 or 18 or 25, that we're supposed to retire at 65. That, in the US, that it makes sense to leave the community of a lifetime and go to a place where only old folks live
Right.
with you. I think those are all conventions that we made up during the 20th century, often for some good reasons, but reasons that make less and less sense as we age. So I think that's, challenge those things. And finally, back to the ultimate point of the book, which is social health is health. And, if you have a plan, if you're thinking about a diet or exercise or healthcare plans, think about your social connection plans.
Wow.
And there's lots. And the trick to that is not becoming the sort of life of the party. It's about being next to someone for time. Like social connections, friendships are about proximity, right? There's a researcher named Jeffrey Hall from the University of Kansas. Sorry, I'm going on long because I just get really wired up about
Good.
it.
Love it. Yeah.
So Jeffrey Hall's finding about friendships is that it's mostly about proximity. 80 hours with someone to be a casual friend, 200 to be a close friend. And that's why kids often have friendships in schools often last longer, because you're with those people year after year, hour after hour. So think about who you're going to be next to and where you can be. It could be work, it could be volunteering, it could be at school. Think about how you can socially connect as you age. Is really sort of a key part of your health plan for your hopefully for your century-long life.
So I heard continue learning.
Yep.
Continue staying positive.
Yeah.
And plan out your lunch dates.
Yeah, I love the idea. Like you were saying, we talk about financial planning so much and we never talk about social planning. I think that is a very, very good point.
Speaking of good points, Rach, you want to pull some out of him for
yes.
these last questions?
All right, Ken, are you ready for your final 3 rapid fire questions?
I don't know.
Okay, we'll find out. Okay, first one. What do you not miss about being younger?
Oh, so I have an 18-year-old son, so lots. There's things obviously, but I have an 18-year-old son who is full of nerves and uncertainty and social challenges. And I should stop talking badly about him because he's a wonderful kid. But, all ages come with all sorts of different challenges that I don't miss. Much more certain in my life, much more certain in my relationships, much more certain about, I worry much less about what other people think about me than I used to. There's lots of things positive that comes with age and experience and wisdom. And I love all of them. Some things I miss, of course, but there's a lot that I'm glad to leave behind.
Yeah. And I'm sure, even just being in proximity to an 18-year-old really makes those differences pretty staggering. Okay. Second question. What is the gold in getting old?
What is the gold in getting old?
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. We often talk about older age as a time of loss. And of course, there are all losses that come with older age. But there is such a thing called the U curve of happiness that shows that sort of relationship to happiness tends to be higher when you're young, and you tend to be less happy in midlife, which we often think about as a happier time, and happier in old age. And that's because I think, not because things are better, but because you've learned and experienced what matters and what doesn't. And, you're much able to weather, you're more resilient, you're more able to weather change and still be happy. So there's gold, I think, in the wisdom, experience, and knowledge that you develop across a lifetime.
Cool. Beautiful. Okay. Last one for you. Go ahead and finish this sentence for us. I will know the future is old when...
I will know the future is old when... Oh, I'm going to strike out on the last one. I will know the future is old when we learn to respect all stages of life. So I think one of the challenges, I actually don't think the future is old. I love the title, but I think the future is multi-generational, right? So one of the things, if you look, we used to be a pyramid with lots of young people and just a few old people. Now we're a rectangle where there's almost equal number of people at every stages of life.
Wow.
And I think that's a great thing. Right. And I will know the future. We're meeting that future when we learn to respect every stages of life, and every stage of life is connected with each other.
Cool.
So that's a little bit of a cop out because I didn't actually answer the question, but
That's a good
I hope
answer.
I hope it suffices anyway.
It suffices.
It does. Ken, listen, thank you so much for your time today. I know you have a ton of stuff going on. If people wanted to find you and your work, where do they go?
Oh, so, lots of different places. So if you find out, so a couple places I'll just mention. Go to our website, longevity-project.com. Our podcast, Century Lives, it's actually from the Stanford Center on Longevity. So you can find it both at the Stanford Center Longevity website and every place you go. To our newsletters, which you can find through our 3 Not So Bad Things About Aging and Longevity, and Healthy to 100, which is our social connection newsletter. And finally, I will promote, and thank you for letting me do this, Grand People, which is our Instagram channel, which tells the life of people in the second half of life doing important, meaningful, productive, and sometimes weird things, just as you do in the first half of life.
Well, we're going to link to all of that in the show notes. Ken Stern, thank you so much for joining us on The Future is Old.
Oh, I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.